So introducing John Schickel to this group is really not necessary. I know everybody in here knows John real well. Maybe not our visitors as much, but they will by the end of the day. And John is one of those kind of guys that makes you feel like, well, he must be our Rotary Club personal senator, because any time you ask him a question or propose a suggestion, he's all ears and willing to help. He's got a lifetime of public service with the law enforcement career, and then on to other careers. And
Yeah, always job.
Yeah. He serves as our senator. So John is a great guy, and please help me welcome him to.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and Don is exactly right. When I look around this room, most of there's not
Thank you, John.
know what to do. It's great to be here and look out on this room, because most of the folks in here I've known ever since I've been here. There's a few who don't, and for those of you who don't, my name is John Schickel, and I serve as your state senator. It's my great honor to serve as your state senator. It's also a great honor to be part of Rotary. I've been in this club a long time, and it's great to be in a club. When I first came to Boone County, there was a group called the Boone County Business Association. And I remember back in those days, that was the go-to club. Everyone in Boone County JC, Jerry Moore was president of it. Those were kind of the two social clubs. Today, I really feel like the go-to club is Rotary. Part of that is because we're all older and we want to meet at lunchtime, not in anything, I guess. But I love Rotary, and I love my Rotary family. So I'm honored that you let me come. I call this my annual address to the community. Hello, Facebook friends. We're glad that you can join us to my annual address to the Boone County community here at the Lawrence Rotary. It's kind of strange, because as Don said, I started out in the Florence Police, Boone County Jail. You have a lot of different really good jobs in my life, all of them in public service. And I get the question from a lot of folks sometimes. They say, well, how did you get into politics? And I know I probably told this story before, so excuse me, but it's one of my favorite stories. They say, how did you get into politics? People come to me for advice, and they'll go, how did you get into politics? And I always say to them, I'm not in politics. My job is not politics. And if you want to get in public service, you should really look at your job as not being politics. I enjoy the political process. I enjoy the competition. I think I know a little bit about politics. But my job is public service. I got that from Bruce Ferguson. He always used the term public service. So I look at my job as being public service. And I'm very lucky, because there's never a dull moment when you're state senator. And I feel so special that even Monty wrote came here today. Monty doesn't get out very often. 3 or 4 years. Monty Taylor, right? But great to see you, Monty. But every day is different. A lot of my day is spent, believe it or not, with constituent matters. And I see Matthew Webster there, who's going to be the new county administrator. And I have to just brag a little bit on our county government and our city government, because almost everything I do as far as constituent service is in cooperation with them. And we have a great relationship. And Gary's exactly right. Jeff Earlywine is really going to be missed, but Matthew Webster's can do a great job. But for instance, let's just take roads for a minute, because roads are so very important in Boone County. Most first people don't have any idea whether they're on a state road, a county road, or city. A really good way to remember it is, if you live in a subdivision, you're probably on a county or city road, if you're in a subdivision. If you're out on the highway, you're probably on a state road. But if you're on one that I call in-between roads, and we have quite a few of those highways, those are county roads also. But most major roads in Boone County are state roads. And that's why I try to focus like a laser. Next year, our road plan is going to be open. It's every other year. Last year, the road plan wasn't open. This year, next year, the road plan will be open again. And I'm refocusing like a laser on that road. And we've done, thanks to Dallas, Toro, Gary Moore, and others, we've done great. We've done great with our road. But it's very important that we continue to do great. And I'm going to be going again to our county and city government because, and Judge Executive Moore is an expert on this. I mean, there's nobody who knows road in that system better than he does. It really does. So I go to him and with this council, we kind of get a game plan together where we go do what's best as far as roads. And you get people complaining whichever way you go, because when you have roads, then you have construction, you have barrels and stuff like that. People don't like that. But that's why we have all these barrels and construction and everything, because we have over $600 million worth of state investment in Northern Kentucky. That's going on right now. I mean, we've done fantastic with our roads. And so that's going on right now. I watched the landscape change over the years. When I first came to Boone County, it was about how can we get economic development. Now it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant with economic development. So our focus is on controlling it in an orderly manner. We can't stop it, but we want to control it in an orderly manner. So I look forward to working on this project. I'm going to talk about some specific legislation that happened this last session that I think we'll all be interested in. But before I do that, I want to just talk generally. You know, we have almost a whole new House delegation, not in the Senate, and then we have the House of Representatives, and we have almost a whole new House delegation, and I'm working very well with that. But one of the things they've done is they've had a lot of meetings out in the community, and I've gone to all of them. I've been to 3 of them, and now I'm with you here today. I got one more scheduled after that. So they are really in touch with the community, and I'm going to all those meetings. But one thing I think it's important to remember is that, you know, there's a tendency, I hear this in Frankfurt a lot. Well, somebody comes to Frankfurt complaining, and they say, well, why are you just here now? You know, you should have been at that committee meeting last summer when this was first being discussed. Or at a planning and zoning meeting, it's, well, why didn't you have input on the comprehensive plan? This is a done deal. And I always kind of look at that's really kind of a cop out from an elected official. Because the fact of the matter is, if you're going to go to all the zoning meetings, go to all the committees and meetings in Frankfurt, you go for the state senate, and you go for the House, okay? People have their lives full. They have work, they have jobs. So what they do in a representative republic is they try to elect someone that represents their values. They can go to Frankfurt on their behalf and not do what they want all the time, but somebody who generally represents their values. The only people that have time to go to Frankfurt all the time are special interests. And so I try to remember that and try to remember the public is my special interest because I'm down there on their behalf. So I try, that's kind of the way I look at it, more than expecting the citizens to be down there meeting about things that are happening next year and things like that, because I just don't really think that's really the way the world works for most people. You know, when I'm catching hell on the vote somebody that doesn't agree with it, you know, I can say that, you know, why weren't you here 2 years ago when we had this committee meeting? But really, it kind of rings hollow. I think we just kind of need to take our lumps and say, well, I'm sorry, I just simply disagree with you. Because there's no way, we're gonna always have things that we agree with and disagree with. This is the 15 years I've been in the Senate. They do the roll call vote and it's by alphabet, Schickel towards the end. So I'm sitting there watching how it's going. And I'll be holding my phone and Gary Moore be texting me saying, vote this way. And Gary Carter will be texting me saying, vote. My vote is coming down. Good friends telling me to vote. So the communication today is Facebook, Twitter. It's in real time. So people have completely different expectations than they used to. And so it's just something you have to get adjusted to. People say, well, what do you do when you're not in session? Well, my answer to that is, I don't know. One of the House members said that, told me that one office, they said everybody knows you, but nobody knows what you do. I thought about that, and I thought, I didn't know quite how to take that, So I thought, well, I guess it's not directly assault. So I said, well, sometimes I don't know what I do either. And that, and that's really about the truth, because it's so varied. Today, the most important issue is why is the lake closed at Big One State Park? People want to fish there. I mean, and it will go from that all the way to, revising the state income tax and everything. But one of the things that we do during the interim is we have passed issues that are very sticky issues. There's a lot of disagreement on big issues. What our leadership does many times, instead of moving that legislation, they tend to appoint a task force to take a deep dive and really look at it. One of those big issues we have right now is what we call certificate of need. How many people know anything about that? Raise your hand if you know what it is. Good. Okay. Well, that's a big issue right now. So what our Senate leadership did and the House leadership, I think very wisely, is they didn't do anything except appointed a task force for this interim. Well, we're going to really look at it. I'm honored to say I'm on the task force. So we're going to be looking at that issue very closely. The other issue, which they appointed a task force, was on corrections, state prisons and county jails. We have north of 15,000 people in our state prisons, and actually close to 20,000 people in our state prisons and in our county jails. It's a big issue. And again, it's very complicated. And the Senate President has appointed me chairman of that task force. So I'm very happy about that. And I'm really looking forward into digging into that this summer. The other thing that I think is a big issue, and that sometimes we don't think about up here in Northern Kentucky, but it's a huge issue. It's a societal issue. And that is the issue of workforce participation. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, Boone County has the best workforce participation of any county in the whole state. Mm-hmm. I brag about that a lot. But before we get too high on ourselves, that isn't even, I think it's like 65 or 7%, something like that. And that's not counting full-time moms, people who are retired. That is people available to work. We would say, without being too judgmental, people that should be working. In other words, for just whatever reason, they're just not working. We have the highest in the state, and we're at 60-something%. It goes down from there. And yet we have jobs everywhere going unfilled. So that's a big problem, workforce participation. I think there may be some solutions to it. Different people have different ideas. But I think it's something that's important to be on your radar, workforce participation, because it really affects all aspects of our society. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about individual legislation, which we had this last session. Probably the biggest one, and the one we're most proud of, is reducing the income tax. We only reduced it by 0.5% at the time. People say, what are you bragging about that for? That's not much. Well, and it's not, right? But it is the beginning of a long process, and I give the Senate President, House President, the Governor a lot of credit. Beginning of a long process where we're going to turn this barge around about how we finance government in Kentucky. What are we going to do? Our goal is to completely eliminate the income. In your handout, and it's not the first page, it's further back in, you can see how we are taxed with regard to states around us. Georgia's the next state. You can see how many follow. You can see how we are taxed by the states around us. As you can see, we are a high tax state. We're a high tax state. It breaks it down real good. Percentage of your income tax or income tax, sales tax, and all that. Well, our goal is to, and we've done this, and we've taught some grief for it, depending on your point of view. We're charging sales tax on more things. It's called broadening the base. But the reason we're doing it is we want to incentivize people making money. We want to incentivize making money. So we have, well, and it's kind of what it has to do with workforce participation. I mean, that's one of the things we want to incentivize people making money. So making money will be incentivized. And we feel like relying more on the sales tax, that way people can kind of choose how they want to be taxed. And our reason for doing that, if you look at the handouts, and not only in those handouts, those are just surrounding states, but states that have gone to that have really improved their economy. Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, right to the south of us, are examples of 3 states that have gone to this model. And all of them have tremendous population increase. States that are raising their income tax, they have population exodus. States like Illinois, states like New York State, states like California. Our goal is to be a state that people come to and that people are not leaving. So that is the reason behind what we're doing. And it's not going to be accomplished in 1 or 2 years. It's going to probably take 5 or 6 years before we get to 0. Because what we've done in there, we put triggers. I'm not a finance man, but I can tell you, Chris McDaniel, chairman of Appropriations Revenue in Kenton County, personal friend of mine, we should be very proud that he's chairman of that committee. That guy is very, very smart about budget. I mean, he really is. I'm very proud that he's right over the border. Whenever I have a question, I can always get to him. He's a great friend. But he is the one that really is spearheading this. And I think he's doing a great job. That's the idea behind it. Now, to be fair, the people that argue against it, and there are people that argue against it, the other side of the argument is that you are penalizing people that are using service. You're penalizing people who are using services. You're letting people off. You're letting the rich, giving the rich a break. That's the argument on the other side of that. Along with that same thing, reducing the income tax is something called right to work. A right to work is just simply that you can't be forced to be in a union. Those 2 things have really incentivized companies on one hand to go to state, new companies, and here in Northern Kentucky, we don't have that problem. We have all the business we want. There's a lot of places in the state would love to have some of the companies we have. So when legislation gets passed, it's not just about Northern Kentucky, it's about the whole state. Speaking of Northern Kentucky, I've just been reelected as chairman of the Northern Kentucky Legislative Caucus. What is that? That is a nonpartisan group of Northern Kentucky legislators, basically all the legislators that are in the Northern Kentucky Area Development District. And our job is to promote Northern Kentucky in the legislature. not a Democrat thing, we got both parties in there, but our first priority is, Northern Kentucky. I did want to mention. Couple votes that I took that might be considered controversial. I heard a lot about it from people, and I got good friends recognized with them on both sides of it. I think in the legislative report we have to talk about medical cannabis. Medical cannabis has been in play in the legislature for as long as I've been there. And I've been there 15 years. I'm the senior legislator, believe it or not. I'm the senior, it seems like I started yesterday. I'm the senior legislator for Northern Kentucky. And every year the cry for medical cannabis gets louder. And I was very conflicted about it. And I continue to be very conflicted about it. I chaired the committee, which it went through. We had several times they would always give it to me, and President Steyer would joke and give it to me because he knew it was controversial. Nobody else wanted it. But that was okay. But I kind of enjoyed it. And you know, it was really emotional because, like I said, this is what I heard in this room. I know that, but at the end of the day, I had to bid yes, and so I voted. And the reason I voted against it was I was troubled. I was troubled to vote against it because so many really good people were for it, friends of mine, and that hurt me. But I was troubled by what I saw. I call it the fruits of what I saw of people, because almost every person I talked to, without exception, I dug down on the issue, they were also for recreation. So I voted against it. The other topic, which, and I don't think these are, well, you know, if you're dying of cancer, it's a big issue, let's say. But the other issue is sports. Got a lot of press on sports media. And I sponsored the bill for historical race, which really turned our horse racing industry around. And we built a new turfway. We have purses now like we've never had in Kentucky before. And when I first heard about sports betting, I thought it was something I could support. But as I researched it and studied it more and more, I realized it really wasn't what I thought it was. I ended up voting against, of course, it passed, as did medical marijuana, both these things passed. But the reason I voted against it was because voting on NCAA sports, gambling on NCAA sports, Thomas More College, Northern, UK basketball, on an app on your phone, an 18-year-old is going to be allowed to do this, okay? I just felt like it was we were creating a society that was, you know, NCAA sports are supposed to be part of the educational process, you know, hard work, competition, disappointment, teamwork, all those things. And I got, oh, Schickel, you're naive, you know, that went away a long time ago. Maybe I'm naive. You know, I had to think of what Jim Bunning told me years ago. I remember when he was posed a similar question, he said, if I'm standing up to my waist in sewage, he says, do my constituents want me to swim in it or try to clean it up? You know, and I thought, not that that's necessarily a perfect analogy, but I wasn't comfortable with it because of the NCAA sports, and I was worried about compromising our youth and also compromising the very integrity of the game. So that was my reason that I didn't vote against it. I didn't really think it helped the horse industry either. Some people say it did, but I don't really think it did. So that was my reasoning, and I know there's folks that disagree with me on it. You know, I wanted to say, and this isn't a state issue, but I just wanted to say it. Well, it kind of is a state issue, but you know, it's kind of fashionable to criticize planning and zoning, and it always has been kind of, you know, fashionable to do that. And I have to admit, I've become part of that. But I was thinking the other day as I was driving around Union, especially where I live, I was looking at all the beautiful trees up in places that are like 15 years old, except Which really, and those developments have completely changed in the last 15 years. And the reason they've changed is planning and zoning required all these trees to be. And when they were planted, they were like this, and now they're like this. And those neighborhoods are really beautiful. And so I just got to thinking, what if we hadn't had planning and zoning? What if we had let those developers just build those places without anything? And I thought, this is pretty nice, neat, really. Not that planning and zoning is not without its fault, but I thought this is a really example of how a planned community. If you go to Sonic from Union, I like to eat the best restaurant. you sit on the patio. 7 years ago, you could look all the way down 42. Now you sit there and it's a complete canopy of trees all the way around. And that whole neighborhood is like that. You go to Burlington, the strip centers in Burlington. Hebert's a little bit newer yet, so we haven't quite seen it develop, but I've really seen that in my neighborhood. But I just thought it was something to mention because I think it's positive, something we don't think about very often. Monty, I'm sorry for calling you by the wrong name. I even had it written in my notes here. That concludes my presentation. I want you to look at your pie chart there, the very first page, because I love pie charts. And if you're not good with budget, all you have to do is look at that. And that tells the story of where your state money is spent. Most of it, rightfully so, public education. Sometimes my conservative friends, I have to remind them that public education is a constitutional responsibility in our Constitution. And so, and it's in our Constitution for a reason. Now, by the same token, look at Medicaid in there, that's not constitutional. That's something we've taken on, and we're spending a bunch of money on it. And every year we spend a lot more money on it. These are just some of my observations. I hear people saying that we're spending all our money on jails and prisons, but the fact of the matter is we only spend 5% of our total budget on that, and it's a constitutional responsibility. When I look at a budget and I look at where we're spending money, that's always the first question I ask: is this a constitutional responsibility? So I just think that's interesting. But I could sit up all day and talk about the budget. But I think that pie chart shows you everything you need to know. Then there's another interesting pie chart, and that is in the very back, and that's the road fund. Gary Moore can tell you, forgot more about this than I know, but that tells us how we pay for our roads. The second last page. And then the last page shows how it's appropriated. But road infrastructure, it's a huge issue. And in Kentucky, we're very fortunate because we have a constitutionally separate, our road fund is constitutionally separated. In other words, in some states, they have one big pie and you got to go fight for your road money like you do for schools or jails. But in Kentucky, our road fund is constitutionally separate. So I think it's a good thing because it makes us prioritize roads because that's all we use it for. And as you can see, we raise most of our money for the road fund from fuel tax. And then it goes down from there. Second most motor vehicle usage tax. The big controversy now about the road fund is it's really staring us right in the face is electric cars. Mm-hmm. And how are we going to make them pay their fair share? Because they're roads like everybody else. Complete change in the timing. I'm going to open up to any questions. I have 10 minutes left, and I don't want to go over unless somebody wants mention something I forgot to talk about.
John, why are the Kentucky State Police listed in the appropriation? What's that money do?
Well, believe it or not, Gary, the Kentucky State Police are financed through the road fund. And the reason they're financed through the road fund is, when they were created, I think they were created in the 50s, late 40s. In fact, when they were first, it was the Kentucky Highway Patrol. So, and it's never been changed from that. There's been a lot of talk about taking them out of there, putting them in the general fund. Of course, they kind of like being in the road fund because that's where all the money is. But that's how that got started.
Hey, John, with the casino, why isn't there games like roulette and blackjack and craps in the casinos? I mean, you get a slot machine, but you don't have those.
Well, Monty, first of all, I'm against casinos. Okay, I want you to know that right up front. Wasn't always that way. You know, my very first election, I ran against my friend Charlie Walton. And for the Senate, wasn't my first election, my first election for the Senate. And casinos was more on the table then than it is now, because with the way we have our thoroughbred racing industry now thriving, that industry does not want casinos. At the time, they were pushing casinos as a way to subsidize purses. When we created historical racing, that has been so good to the horse industry because we put the profits from historical racing into purses for thoroughbred racing. Purses are the mother's milk of thoroughbred racing, because that is what we have. Purses now out in Turfway, $80,000-$90,000 on just a regular race. Before historical racing were like $11,000. So thoroughbred, we have you know, and I'm not naming there here in a month or two to talk about it, but our thoroughbred racing industry is thriving. We have peak trainers that used to stay in Saratoga all summer, now are down here in Kentucky. So it's just thriving. But to answer your question directly, Monty, is because it's against the law. That's why the law's never been changed. When I first went to the legislature, there was a big push for casino gaming. We don't really see that now. I think partly because the market's saturated. A lot of the casinos are, you know, that are around us aren't really doing that well. The horse industry doesn't want it because they're going gangbusters. And quite frankly, I don't want it because I love our horse industry, number one. And number two, I just don't see where Kentucky gains from. But that's the reason. A lot of good people disagree with me on it. Yes, Dennis.
Speaking of the horse industry, what have you all heard down there with regard to all the fatalities we had down there at Churchill Downs? Yeah, one today.
You know, I don't know, Dennis. It's a tragedy for sure. No one seems to know what's causing it. That one trainer was involved more, you know, there was one trainer that had more of them. Of course, I was telling somebody the other day, said, well, he sure looked like a hooligan. That trainer, I don't even know what he looks like. But I don't think there's any real connection. I don't think they know, to be honest with you. They thought maybe there was something wrong with the track. Of course, you are going to get, I mean, when you have, whether it's athletes, horses, or people pushing to their, you know, as hard as they can possibly push, you're going to have some things happen. But to have it like that happen, I don't have an answer for you. I do not know. Yes.
You've all kind of YouTube videos. I was watching one the other day. He said, what are the 10 worst states to retire to?
Mm-hmm.
I thought, surely Kentucky's not on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had the 10th one. Well, we weren't 10. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. I thought, man, we're surely you're not number one. We were the number, according to the statistics, we were the number one worst state to retire to. They had to do taxes.
Yeah. I mean,
It just shocked me.
yeah, and that shocks me too, because I would question, you know, I don't go, but you know, this year I got the number one rating by the family. You know, next year I'll probably get the worst rating. I mean, and then you have all these people that rate and rate states and stuff. And a lot of it depends on how they're rated. it always amazes me, because the more I know of permits, I talk to them about it, how many retired people we have moved to Boone County. They love it here. If you ever, I mean, if Jordan recently been in the campaign, she knows, you go out and around and you knock on the door, and a lot of folks are here in Boone County, in our condominiums, in our smaller homes, our subdivisions, and a lot of times they're here because they're grandkids, they're following their grandkids. But boy, they don't have anything bad to say about it. Most of them love it. But taxes are a problem. And if you look at taxes like Tennessee, if you look at places like Florida, and others, they're, where they have Texas have population coming in, it's about tax policy, because if all things being equal, people aren't going to pay a bunch of taxes if they don't have to. And that's the whole reason to talk about behind my high school buddy. I grew up over in Ohio, and I got a high school buddy. He's a resident of Florida now. He still has a place in my hometown. He's a resident. He's a resident of Florence because of taxes in Ohio. So it's definitely an issue. But I love Kentucky, and I can tell you, a lot of people love living here. We certainly don't have a problem with people wanting to live here.
Don, we had, I think you invited up Reginald Thomas a couple years ago. He had was vehemently against getting rid of the income tax. I mean, what's the chances of that getting pushed through?
About 100%. Reginald Thomas is one of my best friends or big buddies, but he's in the minority, very much in the minority. He's not going to. He's actually in leadership, but he's very much that's going to happen. And Reggie's against it, and I respect his opinion on it. But no, that's not some pipe dream. That's going to happen. The only way it might get slowed down if we don't meet our revenue projections, but it looks like at least for the next couple of years we're in good shape. Yes, Judge.
I know this is not a political speech, but I think it's important for the people here to know that Boone County now has 2 senators, and your all's elections are staggered. Like last year, Jay Williams was elected a senator who represents part of Boone County. Next year, you're on the ballot representing a bigger part of Boone, but it's because we grew and the Senate districts used to have Boone and Gallatin. Now
Part of Kent.
and part of Kennedy. Now you just have part of Boone.
Yes, Judge, thanks for bringing that up. And I actually was going to talk about that. The redistricting, every 10 years, the Kentucky Constitution calls for the legislature to be redistricted. The federal delegation, they have to redistrict too. And how do we do it? We take the total population of the state, we divide per Senate district, and we divide it by 38. That is about 140 to 120 in the Senate district. Yeah. Well, I was the luckiest guy in the world. That was the population of the county. So they said, and I was lucky I get along well with leadership. And they said, well, Schickel, you can just have Boone County. Now remember, they could have done like what they did in Warren County and split it up about 5 different ways and just give them a little piece to a bunch of senators. But they didn't want to have to deal with me. I got to me because there's senators that have like 5 and 6 counties. President Stivers, it takes him all day. He has to spend overnight in his district. I can come out and drive to any part of my district in a little bit of time. So every time, I mean, get off the topic, but every 10 years when it's redistricted, well, our population keeps growing, so my district keeps shrinking. When I first was elected, I had Boone, Gallatin, and a little part of Kenton. Then I lost, just had Boone, and now I don't even have all Boone. I lost the Walton, which is one of my favorite areas. Jay Williams did a great job. He's I would want to have his district because he's got Southern Boone all the way to Frankfurt. You talk about 2 different cultures, and he, and so he's sitting in his office during session with people coming in pounding on his desk that are his constituents in his district that live in Frankfurt. So I don't know that I want to have his area, but But that's the way it works, and then the house, is even more so. We got, I think, Judge, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 6 house members that have part, all, or their districts are either all in Boone County or part of Boone County. And I'm trying to get to know all of them, you know, I've been doing town hall meetings with them folks, but I don't know all really well, just because they're all brand new. You know, one of the things, I try to help and you know, I started this, one of these things I started was a lot of the new members, you know, they say, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? So I created this little index card where you could, I was called it translating Frankfurt speak. Okay, so if they said, you know, like on this side of the card, it says, well, we had some good dialogue. You know, if someone tells you that, you look at that and you say, we had some good dialogue. It says, then you turn around, you see what it means. It says, well, that goes not going anywhere. This one a lot, you get introduced as my good friend. Oh, my good friend. Heard that one, though. What's that mean? That means bend over. But we do have a lot of new folks in Frankfurt, and you know, that's I think the legislature was meant to turn over. Of course, you know, I guess that means that's maybe I'm gonna get a little long in the tooth, and I realize that. Anything else? I'm being told it's time to quit. Thank you all.